What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Just Jen, and today we're getting into some heavy stuff. Now, I have to put this out here and show you guys that it is a disclaimer that I must show you. Opinion disclaimer. Opinion disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed on YouTube are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the original policy or position of Just Jen Reacts. Any content provided by our bloggers or authors are of their own opinions and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. So, seeing as I had to put that out there, my opinions are that of my own. Tucker on Twitter. Now, his latest episode, George Floyd. In this video, we're going to be going over Tucker on George Floyd, but then we're going to bring out the double whammy, the creme de la creme. Well, I guess the holy grail of it all, the original autopsy. And I will be going over that original autopsy with a medical expert, somebody who's been in the medical field for decades, an emergency room nurse, a registered nurse, licensed and all. First, let's go on with Tucker on Twitter, and then we shall talk about the autopsy. All right, Tucker, let's get it on.
Not, in fact, a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Now that we know that Ukraine is not actually winning the war against Russia, it could be time to revisit some of the other slogans we've been assured are true and ordered to repeat. Are they, in fact, true? Did, for example, a racist white cop actually murder a man called George Floyd, a civil rights leader, in Minneapolis on Memorial Day of 2020? Now, we've been told that happened, told it relentlessly for more than 3 years. So at this point, we've been told it so much that pretty much everybody seems to believe it. And because everyone does kind of believe it, a small group of people has been allowed to make massive changes to American society. They include, but are not limited to, decriminalizing stealing, defunding the police, adding a new federal holiday to the calendar called Juneteenth, the ceasing of hiring all white men in corporate America, and of course, significantly, they also sent a cop called Derek Chauvin to prison for more than 40 years. He would be the racist white devil who murdered George Floyd. But the question is, did he actually murder George Floyd? And the answer is, well, no.
Okay, so I'm going to stop Tucker really quickly here, and I'm going to get into what we're going to unpack what he just said. Now, Memorial Day 2020, there's an incident, and I believe it was St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was St. Louis, and there was one George Floyd. Now, a lot of people have forgotten that George Floyd was no martyr. In fact, he had a lengthy criminal record. One that included holding a pregnant woman at gunpoint so that him and his goons could rob her and terrorize her. Now, while the procession of his golden casket was being led with horse-drawn carriages, and every civil rights activist out there today was martyrizing this man, I couldn't help but think about that woman and how she may have felt about seeing her perpetrator coming on television and being made into this giant martyr. And I couldn't help but think about her and her child that is now in the world, right? That my mind automatically went to her because, by then, news had already broke of his criminal past, and it was lengthy. Being that I was in that lifestyle myself, I am, not proud of my past, but it has got me to where I am today. I'll tell you what, I've always maintained a composure with the police. I've always done what I was told to do. I never resisted arrest, because I knew that's another charge. If I had stuff on me that could potentially land me in jail, guess what I didn't do? Well, I didn't resist arrest and cry for my mommy and say that I can't breathe. There was another incident caught on body camera of George Floyd doing the same thing prior to this event. The only difference is George Floyd, this event, consumed about 2 milligrams worth of fentanyl, enough to probably kill me, you, your whole family. That was the difference between this event and the other event that was caught on body cam footage. Now that we got a little history into who George Floyd was, let's not, continue to martyrize this guy. So I'm going to back things up a little bit because I think Tucker's, he's right. It caused all sorts of chaos and anarchy, division, and the media loved it. Every second of it. Back to the show.
Chauvin to prison for more than 40 years. He would be the racist white devil who murdered George Floyd. But the question is, did he actually murder George Floyd? And the answer is, well, no, he didn't murder George Floyd. And we're not guessing about that. We know it conclusively thanks to a new court case now underway in Hennepin County, Minnesota. The case was brought by a prosecutor there called Amy Sweezy. She's suing her boss. So the case is not actually about George Floyd or Derek Chauvin, but it tells you an awful lot about both of them. In her deposition, which you should read, Amy Sweezy describes a conversation that she had with the county medical examiner, Andrew Baker, right after George Floyd died. Quote, I called Dr. Baker early that morning to tell him about the case and to ask him if he would perform the autopsy on Mr. Floyd. Sweezy recalls all this under oath in the deposition. Quote, he called me later in the day on that Tuesday, and he told me that there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structures of Mr. Floyd's neck. There were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation. Oh. In other words, George Floyd, according to the official autopsy, was not murdered.
Okay, let's unpack that, shall we? And we're going to go into this, me and my dear friend, who is a friend of mine, family friend. I actually consider her family. Now, we're going to get into that autopsy findings, and what you will see will absolutely corroborate everything that he just said. Everything that Tucker Carlson just read, well, it says that on the autopsy. So how do we get from having no findings of any sort of asphyxiation, no injuries? Where do we go? How do we get from that to having a police officer in prison for 40 years? Well, the media, I believe, played a massive role in trial. We had trial by media. Derek Chauvin was guilty before, well, CNN finished airing at night, at that day. He was found guilty that day. And unfortunately, with the justice system that we have today, I feel like it needs to be redone completely, because we have an innocent man sitting in prison. A few people actually sitting in prison because of George Floyd. And George Floyd, and when we go over these autopsy findings, you will see that if he hadn't ingested the fentanyl, he would probably still be here today. Well, I don't know, because, being a fentanyl addict and seeing that 300 Americans die every day and they're not martyrized, we're not naming national holidays for them. We're not closing our border. We're not putting up murals for the 300 Americans that die every day, are we? No, we're not. We're not creating holidays in their names. No, we're not naming streets after them. And we certainly aren't rioting and looting in their names either. Now, are we? And burning cities down and calling for the defunding of the police. Now, that is very important for you guys to understand this. At the time, that restraint that Derek Chauvin was putting George Floyd in on the ground, which George Floyd himself asked to do. Get me out of the car. I'm claustrophobic. I want my mommy. Put me on the ground. Put me on the ground. In which they obliged. They didn't have to do that. They could have shut that door and let it. But no, George Floyd was screaming and crying that he was claustrophobic and he's been in a cop car I don't know how many times. So, I mean, like, come on now. Anyways, it's important for you to know that at that time, that policy was just fine with that police department. They have now since got rid of the knee on the back and the knee on the back of the neck. And in the autopsy findings, you will see that there are no injuries at all to laryngeal area. There's no particular hemorrhaging within his eyes. You will see something on this autopsy. You're going to see things you don't even want to know about George Floyd on this autopsy. I think it's important that we discuss many of these things, because I don't know if Tucker's going to talk about these talking points, but I feel like I had to add these.
according to the official autopsy, was not murdered. He died instead of what we used to call natural causes, which in his case would include decades of drug use, as well as the fatal concentration of fentanyl that was in his system on his final day. So this was not a killing. It was yet another narcotics OD in a country that records more than 100,000 of them every year. The medical examiner clearly understood that and, in fact, articulated it. And Sweezy explains. He said to me, she recalls in the deposition, Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on? And then he said, quote, this is the kind of case that ends careers. In other words, everyone lied about it from the very beginning. The people who knew the truth hid the truth and allowed the revolution to proceed. Now they've been exposed. Now we know the truth. What happens next? Well, they're going to ignore it. The Biden administration just issued a long purple statement celebrating George Floyd's birthday. He's a martyr, despite the fact we know that he was not murdered. And by the way, Derek Chauvin is still languishing in jail for the rest of his life.
In federal prison.
How do we respond to the truth once we have it? Well, Vince Everett Ellison seemed like a good man to ask. He's the author of Crime, Inc. He joins us now. Vince, thanks so much for coming on. So as with so many other stories, the origin
thanks for having me, Tucker.
Of COVID, it's a blessing to have you. We now know what actually happened, but the question then is, what do you do with that knowledge? We know that the U.S. government, Tony Fauci, worked with the Chinese to create the virus that overturned the American economy, but like, what do we do with that knowledge? What do we do with the knowledge that George Floyd was not actually strangled to death by a cop?
We have to acknowledge the people that gave it to us and why. See, George Floyd is the Democratic Party's prototypical black man. These are the black men they are trying to create. So George Floyd has to be elevated. He has to be celebrated. He's perfect to them. He was poor. He was uneducated. He was a drug addict. He didn't have a job. He was down there begging and crying and asking the white people to not kill him. To a Democrat, to a white Democrat, this is the perfect black man. So he has to be elevated.
Now, I appreciate Tucker asking a black man himself for his opinion on this, because if it would come from anyone with our complexion, you already know what time it would be. So, Vince, I'm digging the fact that Tucker got you on. He's with Crime, Inc. Apparently, I don't know this man. I've never seen him in my life, but I'm liking what I'm seeing because he's calling it like it is. George Floyd was the perfect storm for the Democratic National Party to use as a poster child for their white supremacy is a leading problem in America. He literally meets every criteria. Check, 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 check.
The white people to not kill him. To a Democrat, to a white Democrat, this is the perfect black man. So he has to be elevated. Look, not a few days ago, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden celebrated hip hop music. They had a celebration of hip hop.
Oh boy.
Hip hop culture is America's culture. It is a genre. It is music and melody and rhyme. And hip hop is also an ethos.
A music genre that calls the black man the N word, calls women the W word and the B word.
Yeah.
Talks about misogyny, shooting police,
drugs,
smoking dope, selling dope.
Yeah, killing,
acting a fool. They celebrated this genre. Why?
Well, because I'll tell you why. Because an educated black person to the Democratic Party is the kryptonite of the Democratic Party. Look at how they attack people like Candace Owens. Look at how they attack them. They attack the black conservatives of the world. Byron Donalds. They call Misha Maynor, the state rep from Georgia that I had on, the N-word with the hard ER. They call people all of these names, and they don't want to see a black person who is educated or a high on the social. It's only if you're a Democrat are you going to be okay. It's sad. It really is. The black conservatives of this country are treated absolutely disgusting.
Because this is how they see black America. They see us the same way they see George Floyd. And they have to make more of us because everywhere they rule, John F. Kennedy stood in front of the Berlin Wall in the 60s and said, If you think that communism is great, let them come to Berlin. Well, if you think that the Democratic Party is great, let them come to Detroit. Let them come to Chicago.
Facts.
Let them come to St. Louis. Let them come to LA, Portland, Seattle, Memphis. Anywhere where they rule, you'll see George Floyd's all over the place. And they're proud of them. In Baltimore, Maryland, they spend $21,000 per child for every child up there inside the school district. Not one school is proficient in math, science, or reading. But they keep it going every year. Why? Because they're producing George Floyd.
But
and George Floyd's vote for the Democratic Party.
But why would, so when most of us, you, me, I think all normal people look at George Floyd's life, you think this is a disaster. This guy never added anything. He took a lot in prison at least 8 times. I mean, his life was a tragedy at best. Why would you want more people like that?
Because he votes for the Democratic Party.
There. Right there. And until you start voting conservative and for the Republican Party, nothing's going to change. That is the honest to God's truth. Nothing is going to change. Has it changed? Has it? In 6 decades, has it changed? They've had 60 years to change things for the Black communities. The Black communities are still poor. The Black communities are still boarded up. They're still ravaged with crime and drugs. The Black schools, the kids are still not efficient at all. Is it going to change if you keep voting for the same people? No, because that's the literal definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The only way you get a different result is you start voting them out and voting in more conservatives. Because believe it or not, despite what the media tells you, boo, the scary conservatives, we want people to thrive and succeed no matter what color you are. No matter what background you come from, no matter what religion you are, we want you to succeed. And we can't if you keep voting in a party who is pro-establishment and not the American people. And that is a fact. I like this guy.
And then he teaches his children to vote for the Democrat Party. And then these white Democrats can feel superior to him. Yeah. He can be controlled by them. Just like, think about an old slave plantation, talking back in the day.
The Democratic
how
plantation.
They wanted their slaves to act. Subservient, obedient, ignorant, doing what he was told, not asking any questions, having a slave mind, being dependent on them. This is how they want Black men to be in America. This is how they want the whole Black community to be. This is why it started in the Civil Rights Movement. When Martin Luther King Jr. in his I Have a Green speech said, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro is still not free. He said 5 times in that speech that we were not free. It turned the Declaration of Independence on its head, because in our Declaration of Independence, it said that our freedom was an unalienable right given us by God.
Yes.
John Locke, in his second treatise of government, said that an unalienable right is a right given from God. It is irrevocable, non-transferable, and unsellable. The government cannot touch it. It supersedes law. It supersedes the Constitution. However, King said that we was coming to government and to the white man for our right to be free. Even at the end of the speech, he said, on some certain day, we'll be free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. He said in that speech, when will we be satisfied? He said, we will never be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. That's a fancy way of saying never. And so Black people heard that speech and said that we were not free here in America. And we make our children recite that speech every single year on King's birthday. And they say in that speech, the Negro is still not free. George Floyd was a slave in his mind. And the Civil Rights Movement caused him to be a slave in his mind. And today they're still marching, 60 years later, telling Black people, you're not free. Beg for reparations, beg for affirmative action, kill your children in the womb, cut off your child, you castrate your children, let drag queens come into school and shake their behinds in your children's faces, run God out of the public square. And then they end up like George Floyd. But the one thing they do consistently is they vote for the Democrat Party, and the places where George Floyd's live, they stay in absolute power.
Absolutely. What he just said, mic drop. I don't think I can say it any better. Coming from a man that grew up in the Black community, that has a Black wife, that has Black children, absolutely. He sees it. And I don't understand why people are not listening to somebody like this. Why would you want to take anything from Uncle Sam? You want reparations? Really? For what? For something that had nothing to do with you, so you could stay in a constant state of victimhood mentality? That's what they want. They don't want you to surpass them or concede them. They don't want you smart and educated and free. They want you a slave to the system. They want you in jail. Look at Kamala Harris. Wow, she was more worried about her conviction rates at that time than anything. She put more black men and women in prison and ruined black families than anybody. And she has no right calling Joe Biden a racist. She has no right, because look what she did. Okay, she kept people in past their out dates. Okay, you keep them in the justice system. There's one web. Keep them in the welfare system. You can't have a husband. You can't have a good paying job. You're reliant on the government for food stamps, for Section 8, for all of this, that, and the other. They keep you down. Abortions. Well, the most dangerous place for a black child is in its mother's womb. That is not a fallacy. 500,000 black babies are aborted every year. So until you stop voting for Democrats, black communities, you'll never be free. You will never be free. You vote them out and show them we're done once and for all. That is when change could happen. I adore this man. I think he's telling it how it is. And I'm really grateful that Tucker is intent on listening to him and letting him speak, because his words are very important. And I shall do so now and let him finish out.
That's a pretty dark explanation. So you're saying that the Democratic Party as an organization intentionally degrades black people to keep them compliant and obedient.
Yes.
Oh, yes. In my book, Crime Inc., I talk about one of the main things they do, like the mafia and organized crime. They humiliate black people. They demoralize them. It's a Marxist construct.
Yes.
They demoralize their people. They beat them down. They tell them that they're victims. Well, it was Martin Luther King Jr. that said, they tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, how can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you're bootless?
Mm.
You know, he told us we were bootless. You know, you have black preachers, and you know about my iron triangle, the black preacher, the black politician, the black civil rights worker. They go into the black community consistently. You're a victim. You're oppressed. The country hates you. Well, see, I look at them and I say, I'm a black man, but I cannot be oppressed. You know why? Because I'm a child of God.
That's
I'm an heir
right.
of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
I cannot be a victim.
That's right.
Why? Because I'm an heir of Jesus Christ. I'm a child of God. I cannot be a victim. See, they tell these people to go against their religion and their basic ideology, because most black men say they're Christians, right? But then they walk around saying, I'm oppressed. I'm a victim. I'm afraid. 365 times in our Bible, they tell us to fear not. Yet they walk around saying they're afraid in the United States of America. LeBron James said he's afraid.
Oh.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says he's afraid. Kaepernick said he's afraid. Well,
wait a second. $1 million a day living behind compounds that we can only dream of, and you're not safe? How does that work? How does that work? Because I tell you what, I don't make $1 million a day. I definitely don't have a compound with walls around my house with secure, like a fleet of cars and private jets. Anybody, any celebrity, and I've said this a million times, I'll say it again. Any celebrity, like Colin Kaepernick especially, is going to tell you that you're oppressed simply because of the color of your skin, is not doing you any favors. What they're doing is fear mongering. Yeah, they sure are. And saying, oh, I can make it, but you can't. Well, they made it, didn't they? And Colin Kaepernick, really? You were literally adopted by a white family, then you sold them out and said that they were racist because they wouldn't let you have cornrows. Yeah. They're really oppressed. Let me tell you something. I would take it personally if somebody told me that I can't. I would do it just out of spite.
I'm a black man in America, and I'm not afraid of a damn thing. I don't ask for permission in my own house. America.
Hold on. Let's do that one again. He's a black man in America, and what is he afraid of?
Afraid. Well, I'm a black man in America, and I'm not afraid of a damn thing. I don't ask for permission in my own house. America is my home. So as they walk around here crying, talking about, I'm frightened, I'm afraid, I can't make it, please help me, I tell them they stink in my nostrils. They're an affront to God. The flip side of white male intimidation during the civil rights was also black male cowardice. They laid down and let them beat them, slap them around, rape their wives and their children. Well, no, not me, never me. I'm a free man. I live in the United States of America. They say it's an honor to be, that there's white supremacy and that white people have some type of privilege. Well, as I said before, it is a privilege to be white, but it's also a privilege to be black.
Yes.
And it's a privilege to be an American. And it's really a privilege to be a Christian in the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of this earth. And they're not going to make a George Floyd out of me. I stand up strong. I look them in the eye. And I say, I'm a free man. My freedom comes from God. It's an unalienable right given to me by him. You cannot touch it. And if you try it, I got two things that'll get you off of me. Jesus and my 38. Don't try me out.
So the Democrats.
That was beautifully said. I'm a free man. God gave me my unalienable rights. You're not taking them away. There's two things that'll get you off me if you say that I'm the victim. Well, God and my 38. Now, just when I thought, hey, this man can't give any more mic drops, he absolutely makes a fool out of me. Yeah, that was absolutely glorious. If only everybody would think like him. But if you did, guess what would happen? The mainstream media, the left, the Democrats would tell you, boo-hoo, they'd probably drum up another George Floyd incident. But they forget to tell you that all out of the 60 plus million police interactions in the United States every year, that a minute fraction end in somebody being killed when they're unarmed and unprovoked. It barely ever happens. The media wants you to believe it happens, though, so they'll tell you that this mostly peaceful protest while the cities are burning down behind you. They'll say that this suspect was unarmed when he's coming after police with a machete. The mainstream media is probably one of the worst things that happen to America and the world because they lie. They lie to divide. That is their 100% number one strategy, is to divide so that they could conquer. They push propaganda no matter who they hurt. Doesn't matter. But what I love about Tucker being on Twitter, yeah, that has been lifted. That veil has been lifted, and we're getting the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth will help us, God. And until we stop being cowardice and start putting God back into our country, it's not going to change. They're going to continue to beat us down no matter what color we are. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love this guy.
Democratic Party used BLM as a domestic militia in the last.
Oh, let me back this up just a little bit. My bad. I'm sorry, guys. Because now they're getting into how they use BLM. Well, they use each other, so they're Marxists. And seeing as their latest response from the Hamas attacks on Israel, I don't know how they're not in prison, not for just saying some horrible stuff and being anti-Semitic, right? But for embezzlement and fraud and all of this, that, and the other. Like George Floyd's family. Did they give him any money? No, they didn't. It was Candace Owens. Remember I talked about her earlier today? Candace Owens went to George Floyd's family and actually the roommates, I believe, the roommates of George Floyd, and paid to get the car out because BLM was supposed to help them and they never did. Well, you raised all this money and you didn't do nothing. So why is BLM not in jail? Why are they allowed? Because, well, they're lobbyists for the Democratic Party. They're part of the establishment. Now, if you or I were to ever scam people out of, let's say, $90 million, we would be in federal prison.
So the Democratic Party used BLM as a domestic militia in the last presidential cycle 2020 to defeat Donald Trump. Do you expect something like that to happen again?
Well, you see how they use the same tactics as Iran. Iran has Hezbollah and Hamas as their militias. And the Democratic Party uses BLM and Antifa as theirs.
Yes.
Throwing the rock and hiding the hand. Of course they're going to do it. They've always done it. Even at the beginning, they used the Ku Klux Klan for the military ring. Now they're using BLM, they're using Antifa, they're using NAACP, and they're their suicide bombers. They're their shock troops. They're their brown shirts. They're their street soldiers. And they're going to go out there, and I guarantee you, Tucker, they're going to look over all the black-on-black violence. They're going to look over all the black men killing black men. They're going to look over all the snatching grabs and all the burning and all the fighting and looting and acting the fool.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to find one crazy white cop that's going to do something to some crazy black man, and then they're going to try to burn this country down for it. That's their plan.
Again?
That's their template. I hope America's ready for it because it's coming. And it always works for them. It always works because the press and everybody's just waiting. Oh, they're on the starting line just waiting for it. And as soon as they find that golden kill, watch them go crazy with it. BLM is going to start getting their money from the Democrat Party because that's who they get it from. The same way that Hamas gets their money from Iran. BLM gets their money from the Democrat Party. And BLM does not stand for Black Lives Matter. It stands for burn, loot, and murder. And that's what we should call them from now on.
Yes.
Vince Everett Ellison, Bible in a 38. It's great to see you today. Thank you very much.
What a smile on him. That was an absolute great, glorious episode of Tucker on Twitter. Now, guys, my next video, it'll be part 2 of this. I hope you stay tuned. I hope you tune in. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you throw a like on the video. Make sure you leave some comments down below because sometimes, well, we get shadow banned over here. Sometimes we get censored over here. And by the way we combat that, put some American flags down in the comment section. Just flood the comment section. You can leave your other comments too. I usually answer comments about 20 minutes or so after I finish airing a video. The first 20 minutes I'm in there. So I will answer questions. Part 2, we're going over the autopsy. So I hope you tune in. I'll see you guys here soon. Thank you for joining me. My name is Just Jen. Take care of yourselves. Stay vigilant and know that what Vince just said is true. They're just waiting for that opportunity to strike. Their claws are out, ready to pounce. As soon as that happens, guys, please, I don't care what color you are, man, we're patriots. We shall not let America become divided anymore, because if we do, guess what? That's it. That's the end of America. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather live on my feet than die on my knees with you guys, right alongside you guys. We will fight to get this country back come hell or high water. And there is nothing that the left, the Democrats, or big tech can do to stop it. All right, guys. Until next time, I'm Just Jen. See ya.